Yo, it's your boy Logos, and today I want to react to one of my favorite history YouTubers, Griffey, the Armchair Historian. He provides excellent videos on history ranging from ancient times to the more modern era, and he goes into depth thinking about certain things that you usually don't think about when you look at the military, unless you're a very deep fan of history or a deep fan of the military side of it, like this video. Going through the evolution of Roman uniforms may sound mundane to some people, but for me, I love it because you can see the evolution of the army. You can see them adapting to certain things or taking technology or weapons from previous peoples that they may have fought against, like the Spanish sword they took and made it their own, and using that to conquer the world. So just seeing these different things is fascinating to me, and I probably would have watched this video in my free time like I planned on it, but it's been a while since I did an upload, and I'm always happy to talk about history and talk about ancient Rome. If you have more videos you want me to react to, or you enjoy this type of stuff and you like it, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll definitely do it more. Like I said, I watch this type of stuff every day I can, so doing it for the channel would just make it more of a treat for me. So let's get into it.
We are now selling a limited edition Roman uniform poster over on Armchair History TV. Sarge and officer tier subscribers to the AHTV membership get a discount on all merchandise. Grab a poster today before it goes away forever on October 23rd. The ancient era of the Roman kingdom is shrouded in mystery. However, we do know that it was far from the cultural and dignified years of the later Republic. Instead, the Roman kingdom was a place marked by poverty, filth, and violence. In the early days, it is likely that the Roman way of waging war was not significantly different from that of other Italic peoples. Local wars and raids often had several clans acting cooperatively. Within these warbands were the clan warriors. The concept of a uniform was non-existent. The quality and quantity of weapons and equipment would vary widely. Clan warriors were without armor, and their typical war gear consisted of a shield and 2 spears, one to be thrown as a missile weapon, while the other was retained for stabbing. During this period, a clan warrior who gained enough power and prestige would inevitably find himself in the position of chieftain. The chieftain acted as the leader and kept the restless clans together. His other, equally important function was to carefully divide the loot. A chieftain's prestige was judged by the plunder he could afford to his clan.
And that kind of reminds me of, like steppe tribes, steppe nomadic nations like the Huns, like Genghis Khan and his steppe warriors, the Mongols, how a lot of their I don't know, you could say notoriety or their power base was built on booty. And by booty, I mean like treasure, gold, stuff they could take from people after conquering them, or through deals, and they distribute that out to their people, their retinue, and that would build up their power base. It's a good thing because if you're successful, you get more followers, you get more stuff, and you get more powerful. But after you die, usually your kingdom falls apart. The Mongol horde didn't immediately fall apart, but they started to frazzle out and infight. I think not the immediate here after Genghis Khan, but the successor after that. That's when they started having issues, and you could say that's a big reason why the Mongols didn't go further into Europe.
This also extended to his own equipment. Chieftains were often resplendent in shining bronze helmets, pectorals, and greaves. Their swords, also bronze, were designed mainly for cutting, but also could be used to thrust or jab. It was above all the sword, which was the chieftain's insignia, which proclaimed his authority in society and prowess in combat. Under the rule of Rome's 6th king, Servius Tullius, a major reform of the military was initiated which reorganized the state exclusively for war. Here began the creation of a citizen army, which induced Rome's citizens to arm themselves. A census of all adult male citizens recorded the value of their property and divided them accordingly into 5 economic classes. A citizen's economic class determined the level of their military contribution. The Romans also adopted more Greek equipment to augment their gear, complementing the new professional standards of the new citizen army.
because at this point they don't have obviously the Roman legions that they're famous for, the flexibility of cohorts and putting their units or their men in the checkerboard formation. That wasn't the case at this time. At this point, they were still fighting like a phalanx type formation, and that left you very vulnerable on your flanks for cavalry or just other units. If they have more people than you, they could use one unit to lock you down and have another lighter, faster unit hit you in your flanks, and then there's nothing you could do. Future battles and future wars by the Romans that the Romans were involved in led to them adapting. If you want to learn more about this stuff, definitely check out Mike Duncan's The History of Rome. It's on Spotify, probably on Apple Music too, because it's very popular, and it's very, very excellent. And he also goes into 7 Kings of Rome, as much as information that they does have on it. Also, he tried to keep at a steady pace because he going through the entire history of Rome up until the collapse of the rest of the Roman Empire. But definitely check it out. I love it.
Special thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Opus Clip. Over the past week and a half, we created a bunch of shorts using Opus Clip, the #1 automated video editing tool that curates, reforms, and edits your long-form content
Usually I would skip it, but I like Griffey, so I'll let this one play through this time.
into shorts with one click, and we've been thrilled with the results. Editing a full video into short-form content is a time-consuming and expensive process, which is why we've turned to Opus Clip to help us edit down the best moments from all of our videos for you to enjoy as YouTube shorts. Opus Clip is affordable, and we can't recommend it enough as a great tool for creators of all sizes who want to get the most out of their content. So whether you're already a successful creator or have always wanted to create a channel, start transforming your videos into short-form content in moments with Opus Clip by using our link in the description to get a 50% discount on an annual plan. First-class citizen soldiers, the wealthiest, fought with the complete armored set typical of a hoplite. A helmet, 2-piece corselet, and greaves, all of bronze. They also carried the klipeos, a bowl-shaped shield. In this new style of spear and shield warfare, the weapon of wealthy citizens was the long thrusting spear. First-class citizen soldiers also carried a sword, but in contrast to prior clan leaders, the sword was now very much a secondary weapon. Men of the second class were equipped similarly to those of the first, but were not expected to provide a full breastplate. They also did not use the round klipeos shield, and were instead equipped with the oblong scutum shield, which was cheaper and offered better protection to the torso and legs. Furthermore, with the scutum, a soldier could be both defensive and offensive, parrying but also punching with its metallic boss plate. The less well-off citizens would have had nothing so elaborate as the bronze or linen breastplates that wealthier citizens wore, but those who could supplied themselves with a small bronze breastplate. To compensate for their lack of armor, these soldiers used the oval scutum instead of the round klipeos. The 4th and 5th classes marked the lowest rung of the Servian system. Soldiers fighting in these classes were armed as skirmishers and little else. 4th class soldiers were expected to be equipped with an oblong shield, spear, javelin, and sword.
And it depending on the country or the nation or empire that deployed these units, especially like the 4th, 5th class citizens, or the type of like weapons or armor they had, they could still be used in a very effective way. I remember during Alexander the Great's battle, I think at Gaugamela, he had his cavalry stand with light skirmishers, and he used that to help defeat the I don't know, I forget the name of the exact empire that Alexander the Great conquered from India and going back towards Anatolia and towards Greece. I want to say the Persians. Yeah, it was the Persians, but I can't name the exact dynasty or what it was called. But yeah, in that battle he met some skirmishers, some javelin men, some light armored people with his horsemen, and together they was able to take apart another cavalry force that was, I think, better or a lot bigger than it was on Alexander the Great side. So just because somebody doesn't have the same great armor or the same frontline capabilities of somebody else doesn't mean you can't use them in an effective way. And it depends on the general whether he can see the battlefield, pick out a plan, and get his enemy to fall into his plan, like Alexander the Great did, Julius Caesar, Napoleon, so many other great generals did, and use his troops in the best way possible to get a victory. Not every unit or every person you have in your army is going to be well trained, but if you can use them the best you can, they can still achieve victory.
While 5th class soldiers were most often left with nothing but slings and stones, with the occasional soldier scraping up enough funds to equip himself with a javelin. The end of the monarchy ushered in the Roman Republic. Under this republic, the old Servian system would be developed further into a society whose citizens were obligated to defend their property by contributing to the military. In terms of equipment, the Roman soldier in this period was still heavily influenced by Greek standards, with bronze helmets, breastplates, and greaves. Their arms were most commonly spears, swords, and daggers. The 4th century gave the Romans a lesson in humiliation. Their defeat by the Gauls at Alia in 390 BC led to the city's sacking and possible destruction, if not for the legendary Marcus Furius Camillus. Later defeats to the Samnites forced Rome to rethink their strategy. After the disaster of Caudine Forks,
I don't know if you're going to go further into it, so I'll just touch on it a little bit. The Samnites was another Italian city or Italian region with troops of their own that was constantly at war with Rome and other Italian city-states in the region. And they lived in more mountainous, rocky terrain. And one thing about phalanxes, what the Greeks and the Romans were using at this time period, they must be on like flat, even terrain, because to do so, it allows your troops to be even in line, have their shields locked together. But if they're on an uneven, rocky terrain, you're going to leave gaps, and then that's going to lead to people getting killed and people fleeing because they're going to lose morale and panic and run away. And then you're going to lose the battle, and that's when really a lot of people get killed. So the reason why they had to change their uniform, change their weapons, and change their tactics was because of war itself, like war often causes you to do. And Rome, part of the reason why Rome was able to last so long is their ability to adapt. They adapted to the Samnites and other Italian city-states. They adapted to Carthage when they had no experience with sea warfare. They took a ship from Carthage, copied it, and then put a damn spike in, like, I don't know, if you want to oversimplify, like a long plank on it with a spike at the end, that way they could just slam that spike into the enemy ship and board it and fight like they would on land. And that's where their advantage was. So Rome constantly adapted to their enemies, and that led to them getting stronger and stronger. And I would say that's a big reason why they became an empire. Also, the fact they wouldn't just give up. They lost a lot of battles, but they still didn't, concede to a defeat. They would keep fighting you until you gave up. And that's just the way it was with Rome.
in 321 BC, the Roman army instituted the Camillian reforms, dropping their rigid phalanx in favor of a maniple system, splitting the legion into several blocks spaced out for maneuverability. The new legionary, like his hoplite counterpart, excelled at close quarters combat, but the legion had greater freedom of movement and flexibility. In the new legion, the first line contained maniplement and counterpart.
I just want to touch on it because the flexibility things may sound like something minor, but when you have to worry about your flanks getting attacked and how often getting attacked on the flank causes you to lose a battle, even still nowadays, because you're attacking somebody that can't defend themselves, so they naturally have to run away. When you have second and third lines, you can move people to the flanks or move people into gaps where people are getting pushed back, and this end up saving Rome many times. It ended up saving Julius Caesar many times while he was in Gaul. I was listening to the Celtic Holocaust podcast from Dan Carlin yesterday and finished it up today, and multiple times they nearly got overran, but having more legions and having good defenses and being able to put troops where they was needed at critical time periods or critical times within the field of battle save you multiple times over. If you have a phalanx, they would have been slaughtered many times over. When you have
excelled at close quarters combat, but the legion had greater freedom of movement and flexibility. In the new legion, the first line contained maniples of Hastati. These were soldiers of few means who were unarmored except for a bronze helmet and a pectoral plate. They carried a scutum and 2 throwing pila spears, one heavy and one lightweight, plus a short thrusting sword. The second line was made up of maniples of principes. These were men in the prime of their lives. They were fairly wealthy and were able to afford decent equipment. They were armed with 2 heavy pila and a sword, which was used after the spear had been thrown. They usually carried a scutum, either in the oval or rectangular style, and wore bronze helmets, often with feathers fixed onto the top to increase stature. Principes wore heavy armor, most commonly chainmail, which offered good protection without hindering movement. The third line was made up of the oldest and most mature men, consisting of maniples of triarii. Many triarii were battle-hardened veterans. They sometimes wore a distinct Etrusco-Corinthian helmet, which was usually adorned with upright feathers and a horsehair crest. They equipped themselves with a long iron mail shirt and an italic strap-on bronze greave on their left leg, though many triarii would equip themselves with a pair. They also carried a scutum and a long thrusting spear, or hasta, with a large socketed iron spearhead and a bronze butt spike. Key to their kit were the gladius, a short thrusting sword, and a knife, the pujo. Despite the early successes of the manipular system, the Middle Republic saw Rome's legions brutalized in the Punic Wars. Tactical weakness and eventual manpower shortages highlighted the need for a new pool of recruits to draw from. Short of the desperation in conscripting slaves, the next best thing was the lower class of Rome's citizenry, the proletarii. These younger and poorer citizens made up the bulk of skirmisher infantry, the velites. These skirmishing troops had been around since Rome's earliest days, but became a staple of Roman armies by the early, middle, and late Republican periods, characterized by their helmet's wolfskin cover, which was used to be distinguished from at a distance. Velites were armed with the gladius and a bundle of javelins. In 107 BC, a general and statesman by the name of Gaius Marius implemented a new system of reforms aimed at revitalizing the Roman army, which had struggled to keep up with the new demands of an expanding empire. The Marian reforms established a professional standing army, replacing the property-based system with standard pay and entitlement for full citizenship and land ownership upon completed service. The army's structure shifted from maniples to cohorts, enhancing flexibility and cohesion. More importantly, it standardized equipment and dress, leading to the conception of the soldier we know today as the typical Roman legionary. The legionary was equipped with many carryovers from the pre-Marian troops.
Before you go into this, I just want to touch on, even though this reform was desperately needed and it ended up saving the Republic, the reforms also led to the downfall because private citizens was able to raise armies and they didn't have allegiance to the government or the Republic anymore, or the Senate. They had now more allegiance or more loyalty to the general that they were fighting under, because that general would help pay them and that would help support them. And then after retirement, that general will help get them some type of land or some type of, subsistence so they could take care of themselves after leaving the army. So you can see how when you have many different powerful men like Marius or Sulla, or in the future, Caesar, Pompey, Crassus, even though he got his army destroyed, he went to fight Parthia. Either way, you can see how having a change of the way you make your army can lead to tyranny down the line. And I think that's the biggest difference between America and Rome. When people say like we're going on the same track of Rome, well, when you look at the military side, at least we don't have that being the case.
Such as the pila, scutum, pujo, and gladius. In addition to this, they wore armor pieces like the Montefortino helmet and chainmail armor. These were not the only pieces available to a legionary, but would have been the most common. An important addition to the legionary's kit was the caligae, or hobnail boots. These were heavy-soled, open-toed military sandals built for durability, protecting the feet while also allowing flexibility and ease of movement. Following the civil wars of the late Republic, Gaius Octavius emerged as Caesar Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. Augustus cut down the bloated and opportunistic legions of the Civil War period, remodeling the army into a permanent force of 28 legions and instigating the greatest period of Roman expansion. He was the first leader to lay clear terms of service, rates of pay, and pensions. The legions were no longer a citizen militia. No one but Augustus had the right to raise new legions, which now owed their loyalty to him alone. In this period of military reform, equipment was once again further centralized. An important development in the early Principate era was the clear distinction in military identity through military belts, the balteos and caligae, which identified a man as a soldier. Many cohorts were still equipped with the chainmail common to the troops of the late Republic. However, the Montefortino type and Culus type helmets were beginning to be phased out, as legionaries were equipped with more elaborate Gallic and Italic style designs. These helmets featured ear guards and hinged cheek guards covering the largest possible part of the face without restricting the soldier's breathing, sight, and shouting range. The 1st century saw the legionary equipped in what is now their most well-known look. This included the adoption of segmented plate armor made of circular bands of metal fastened to internal leather straps. Known today as lorica segmentata, this armor was virtually impenetrable to ancient weapons.
Between that and the samurai armor, I still have to give it to a legionary. I love the armor set of the Roman legion so much.
In addition, the legionary scutum had evolved from the oblong ovals of the Republican era into a smaller, more lighter rectangular shield. Underneath the armor, soldiers wore a short-sleeved, knee-length tunic. In cold weather, long-sleeved tunics, trousers, socks, and laced boots were commonly worn. By the time of Emperor Hadrian, Roman territory spanned almost all of Europe, the Mediterranean, Anatolia, and the Levant. Having reached its farthest extent, the empire began to shift towards a defensive posture, using its legions as garrisons. Given the distance between provinces, it was natural that local cultures would influence the dress and uniform of legionaries in their region. Soldiers serving on the British frontier would look different from those in Italy, Greece, or the eastern provinces. After the collapse of the Severan dynasty in 235 AD, the empire was plunged into 50 years of chaos and civil wars. It was also during this period that the dress and equipment again changed, as the streamlined process of the early Principate had buckled under the constant need for new troops. By the 3rd century, the traditional Italic and Gallic style helmet was gone. In its place, legionaries wore a heavier helmet of single bowl construction. These offered excellent protection for the head and neck, but the cheek pieces obscured peripheral vision and did not include ear holes. The soldier's mail now had sleeves extending down to the elbows. Notably, the legionaries would wear full trousers, socks, and shoes known as carbatine. Legionaries used a weighted pilum, a pujo, and a scutum, while the gladius was replaced by a spata, which was still used for thrusting but could also be used for slashing. Later legionaries carried a slightly dished oval shield that began replacing the scutum during the 3rd century. They were of plank construction and had reinforcing bars and stitched-on rawhide edging. Soldiers carried a pilum, and their massive swords, despite their length, were still a cut-and-thrust weapon. Despite the change of sword, these legionaries still carried a pujo. Their short mail shirt was worn over a padded arming garment. The iron helmet, a far simpler piece, was composed of many small sections riveted together.
This is also, this goes back to what I said at the start, how you could see the evolution of an army and the evolution of an empire just through the uniforms. the quality is going down after it rolls back up, just like the Empire did. They started low, they reached their zenith, and now they're falling down slowly into collapse. And you see in the armor, the wealth, the weapons being used, they're being less of a good quality. Like you said with the helmet, he's not showing any plate armor anymore. I would say the new shield is inferior to the previous one, but that's just me.
Such helmets became the norm, as they were cheaper and easier to produce. Since the 2nd century AD, an important class of people had established themselves within Roman society: the barbarians. These were people who existed outside the Roman perception of civility and culture. They were tribal people originating from the regions of Europe and outside of the empire. Since the early Principate, many barbarians had served the empire as auxiliaries, but following the crisis of the 3rd century, they began to settle in the empire more permanently, transforming their role in the Roman military. To relieve recruitment issues, many barbarians began to be conscripted directly into the army and served under Roman officers. Illyrian soldiers formed the core of the Roman armies in the chaotic 3rd century. They wore bronze-scale armor and were armed with a lancea, a fairly light spear that could be thrown just before contact or retained for hand-to-hand fighting. Their shield was a large dished oval, constructed of wood planks, covered and bound with leather. It also had a hollow iron boss, which covered the center hand grip. Under Emperor Diocletian, the crisis of the 3rd century finally ended. To stabilize the empire, Diocletian instituted a wide array of reforms. Among these was the reintroduction of systematic annual conscription of Roman citizens, not seen since the Roman Republic, and a restructuring of the military that split the army into 2 divisions: frontier guards, or limitane, and mobile forces, or comitatenses. Soldiers would be equipped specifically for the duties required of their division, though the practice of uniform standardization would be superseded by the issuing of a clothing allowance, meaning soldiers had to organize their own dress accordingly. Responsible for manning the defensive outposts and garrisons of the empire's borderlands, the limitane varied from young conscripts to old veterans. They were lightly equipped compared to their mobile counterparts, wearing a Berkosovo-style helmet with little else in the form of armor. They carried an oval shield, a spear, a small hunting knife, and a pilum. Comitatenses were generally better armed and drilled than the limitane, serving as rapid responders to any external threats to the empire. They wore a ridge helmet with cheek guards, but without nose or neck guards. The helmet also bore a red plume made of stiffened horsehair. They wore mail with elbow-length sleeves and a hem reaching down to protect the thighs. Underneath, they wore a long-sleeved tunic and leather shoes. They carried a sword and their primary weapon, the lancea, a spear which was light enough to be thrown just before contact. Palatini were the elites of the late Roman army. While they acted similarly to the comitatenses, these elite troops outranked both them and the limitane. The Palatini's expertise made them sought after by Roman military commanders. They wore a plumed version of the ridge helmet. These plumes were usually stiffened horsehair, and they matched shield colors to help unit identification. Like the comitatenses, they carried both a spear and sword. Although Rome would fall in the 4th century, the evolution of Roman units would continue for almost 1,000 years under the Byzantines.
That's a really good video. I hope he does an evolution of Byzantine uniforms, because I'll be very interested in seeing that, especially with the focus more on cavalry and adapting to the Eastern combat and the Eastern theater. That'll be very interesting to see. If you enjoyed me reacting to Griffey's video, definitely let me know in the comments down below, and I'll definitely do more of it. But like I said, I do this stuff in my free time, so I might as well just do it for the podcast. Like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy it. It's your boy Logos, and I'll see you next time. Peace.